I mean, let me give you an analogy. If my boss, and I don't do anything nearly.
What would in your 23, almost 23 years in radio? What would you say is your most memorable moment that you've had in radio? Like a funny story or whatnot?
I don't know. There's been so many great experiences that I've had through being on the air. In 1995, I got to go cover the World Series when the Atlanta Braves were playing. I was there when the Braves clinched. I was on the field during batting practice in the 1995 World Series and and I smuggled a camera with me, and I got these great pictures too. But that was a great experience, covering sports and news and things like that. Covering the flood of '94 was probably the biggest story locally that I got to cover.
Where were you when you covered it? Which station?
I was with WDEN at that time. And worked with I did the evening show and did a call-in and dedication show called Cryin', Lovin' or Leavin'. That was a dedication and request show, and those were some really bizarre, sometimes they were sweet and heartfelt, sometimes they were a little strange. But I worked with a really good newsman by the name of Ken Mann, God rest his soul. But he and I went out and did a lot of extensive coverage of the flood of '94. All across the area. And so got to know then Governor Zell Miller through that, and met a lot of dignitaries through my years in radio. But I think most lately of note, at least here at WRWR, WNNG, if you will, some years back during the Iraq War,
right,
an old classmate of mine from Mercer who went through the ROTC program and subsequently into the U.S. Army and flew helicopters for a while. I actually dated his younger sister. Well, after graduation, he went on into the service, and I continued in broadcasting. And he wound up being the public affairs man on General Petraeus' staff. So Colonel Steve Boylan, who's Mercer grad, wound up being in Baghdad, in the Green Zone, with the general. And we did a series of phone interviews. He'd call me on his cell, and we would, record it or do it live on the air here at WRWR. So we would actually get live reports from the Green Zone in Baghdad during the Iraq War.
Oh, man.
And being in a military town and growing up, my dad worked at Robbins Air Base for 54 years. Until he retired when he was 80.
Yeah.
And so I have a strong military feeling and a lot of respect for our men and women in uniform and their service. So having that option and that opportunity to even, get the poop, so to speak, straight from the top
right,
in a live combat situation was quite interesting. And it gave us a personal perspective of what was actually going on there. When a lot of times in major networks, you get a short feed, you might get a 2-minute blurb or a short story or piece on the networks, whereas we were getting an hour interview with someone right there at the top who had basically the pulse of what was going on.
Right.
And I'd say that experience was really rewarding. Through a friend who's a professor at Fort Valley State, another one that comes to mind is Dr. Joseph White, who came and spoke at Fort Valley. Well, he is on the board at the National Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C. And so Dr. White actually did a couple of hour interview with me, and we had a chance to talk about history. I've always been a student of history and loved history. And so having a chance to get to know and interview people like Dr. White from the Holocaust Museum, very touching and moving just to hear about. And you can see pictures and you can see images of the Holocaust and what happened with the extermination of the Jews in World War II in Germany, and it'll break your heart. But to get those kind of interviews are really tremendous and rewarding to me personally. But what was more rewarding to me all through the years in radio I'd have to say was getting involved in the community and being a public service director at one time, going out and doing Walktoberfest to raise money for the March of Dimes, to do the Relay for Life to help raise money for cancer research, to to do things that give back, to help others. And we helped out with the Vietnam Veterans of America just this past Christmas. They did a toy drive to get toys for the troops of the 48th Brigade who are overseas and their kids who are back here and might not have had as bright a Christmas since their, mother or father might be overseas. So the Vietnam vets, joined together, and we helped publicize it, and they were able to get toys for these kids. So, and beyond that, working for St. Jude Children's Research Hospital and doing radiothons for them, because the airwaves are public airwaves.
Right.
And doing news and sports, it's all fun, not always. Sometimes you have to report sad stories or disturbing stories or heartbreaking stories. But when you can actually spend a little time, even if it's a 12, 14, 16-hour day sometimes, but those radiothons where we knew that money's going and it might make the difference in a child surviving cancer.
Yeah.
So that it's a warm fuzzy is what we call it in the business, because and it's what we're supposed to do. I grew up in a Baptist church, and Jesus said that you are your brother's keeper. Love thy neighbor as thyself. And so if too many times the airwaves get polluted, if you will, with people from one perspective or another that have their spin on the way things should be. But if we can take time and use the radio waves properly, we can lift people up.
All right. When did you find out about the format, about the call letter change?
Oh, that's been about 6 weeks, 7 weeks ago, I guess.
What did you think about hearing about the call letter change? What went through your mind?
Well, I was actually approached by the program director, who said, "Hey, we're going to do a call letter change. We got to come up with a branding for it.
Yeah.
We're going to go from WNNG to WRWR. What are we going to do?" And I'm like, WRWR. We are Warner Robins. It just, stood out to me like a sore thumb.
Yeah.
And so, being here in the city, formerly it was NNG, formerly before that it was COP, WCOP. And like they want to, tie us to the local area. Well, WRWR, that pretty much does. What could it be but we are Warner Robins.
Right. So, so it just like, you just blurted it out, not thinking, it would be used, and then there you go.
It just right off the top of my head. It just boom, there it was.
In the next video, we'll have the conclusion of the interview with Todd Wilson.